God is quiet now because the test has already started. You don't hear him anymore, do you? That voice that once whispered comfort, gone. The signs you used to recognize, absent. The feeling of being guided, distant. And so, you assume he's left. But consider this. What if the silence is not punishment, but a promotion? What if the absence of the answer is the evidence that the exam has already begun? In every classroom, there comes a moment when the teacher stops speaking, not because they've given up, but because the test is now in your hands. The time for teaching has ended. Questions have been laid before you, and in that sacred silence, your choices start to speak. You see, silence doesn't mean he walked away. It means he's watching now, not to interfere, but to observe what you've learned, because real growth doesn't happen during the lecture. It happens when the student is left alone with the questions. We often cry out, "Where are you, God?" And the heavens say nothing, but what if the silence isn't empty? What if it's full of expectation? What if the quiet is heavy, not with absence, but with trust? Trust that you were given everything you needed before the test began. You were warned, you were trained, you were instructed, and now it's your turn to answer. So many people mistake silence for distance, but silence, in truth, is a sign of presence, withheld for purpose. You don't yell answers during the exam, do you? No teacher does. They stand back, they wait. They let the student wrestle with the test, to see what they've become, and that's what's happening now. This quiet, it's not abandonment, it's trust, divine trust in your preparation, in your strength, in your memory, in your integrity. The silence is not the void, it's the proving ground, and if you've ever asked for growth, for strength, for purpose, this silence is the answer, because this is where growth hides, in discomfort. This is where strength is born in uncertainty, and this is where purpose emerges, in silence. The test may be long, you may not feel ready, but God is not silent because he doesn't care. He's silent because he already did care enough to prepare you for this moment. Remember this, you were not left, you were launched. The voice may be quiet, but the lesson is echoing, and the question now is not, where is God? The question is, where are you? Because the test has started, and the room is silent, not because God is gone, but because it's your move now. You used to feel something when you prayed. Now it feels like you're talking into an empty sky. No sudden peace, no stirring confirmation, no whisper in the soul, and your first thought is he must have left, because surely if he were near you would feel something, hear something, sense something, but silence. Silence convinces you of absence. Yet think carefully, is silence always a sign of being gone? When the sun disappears behind clouds, do you believe the sun no longer exists, or do you understand it's simply hidden, working, still burning? When a parent lets go of their child's bicycle seat for the first time, they don't stop caring. They simply want to see, can the child balance now? God's silence is not disinterest. It's a different kind of presence. A presence that no longer holds your hand because now you're supposed to walk. A presence that stops feeding you because now you should pick up the fork. You mistake silence for abandonment because you've never had to stand this long on your own. But just because God is not talking doesn't mean he's not watching, doesn't mean he's not working, doesn't mean he's not there. Have you ever listened to someone breathe in a room that's gone quiet? You didn't hear their voice, but you knew they were there. That's what this is. His voice may be still, but the breath of his preparation surrounds you. He's not speaking, because he already has. And when the words of instruction have been spoken, it is not repetition that follows, but responsibility. God's silence is the handing over of keys, not the slamming of a door. It is the calm before the climb, the stillness that says, now it's your turn, but the silence feels like a void, because noise makes us feel secure. We are addicted to direction. We crave confirmation. We want answers every mile of the road. But silence, it forces you to remember, to recall what you already know, to choose, without being told again, because you weren't built to be handheld forever. You were built to grow, and growth requires space. Silence gives space, Not space to fail, but space to apply what you've already been given. You say he's not speaking, but is it possible that he already did? Did he not already say, forgive, trust, wait, stay faithful, be still? And now you face the situation and you hear nothing new because there's nothing new to say. You are not in need of a voice. You are in need of obedience. We say, God, where are you? And heaven responds, I am where I've always been now, where are you? Silence is not his disappearance. It is your opportunity, an opportunity to show what you really believe when the voice is gone, when the lights go out, when the comfort leaves, when the cushion is removed. Do you still stand? That's why silence is not absence. It is evidence, evidence of his trust in you. He wouldn't go quiet if you hadn't been equipped. The coach doesn't keep shouting when the player is in the ring. The silence is a statement. You're ready now, even if you don't feel it. You don't need another word. You need to remember the ones he already gave. The silence isn't abandonment, it's graduation, and the quiet doesn't say I'm done. It says, now, show me what you've learned. Because when God goes silent, it means you've stepped into something sacred, the proving ground, the testing field, the moment where faith stops being theory and becomes choice. He's not gone, he's just watching now, because the test has already begun, and silence is the sound of trust. You remember the silence now, don't you? That strange stillness in the exam hall. No teaching, no explanations, just the weight of the questions. That moment when the teacher steps back, and you're left with nothing but your pen, your paper, and your preparation. It's not punishment, it's protocol, because once the test begins, the teacher must be silent, not because they no longer care, but because now it's your moment to reveal what you've understood, what you've internalized, what you've actually believed. You begged for guidance, he gave it. You pleaded for clarity, he offered it. But now the test is in front of you, and heaven is silent, because earth is answering, and that's the design. Exams are not the time for new instruction. They're the moment of reflection to draw from what was already taught. So if you feel abandoned, check again. You're not abandoned. You're being examined. You feel tension in your chest. That's normal. That's the pressure of responsibility. But remember, tests don't come to destroy. They come to measure, to bring to light what was hidden inside, not to embarrass, but to expose truth, to separate theory from trust, words from action, religion from faith. You see, you can rehearse all the verses, but now you're faced with real pain, real disappointment, real uncertainty, and the question isn't, can you quote the promise? The question is, can you live it while it looks like a lie? That's what the exam tests. The silence isn't empty. It's intentional. It's not cold. It's calculated. You asked for strength. Here's the silence to grow it. You prayed for wisdom. Here's the stillness to find it. Because real wisdom isn't handed to you mid-test. It's drawn from what was already deposited. The teacher knows the rules. They know when to speak, and they know when to stop speaking. So why do you assume silence means absence? Have you forgotten? The teacher is still in the room, watching, not from disinterest, but from authority. They're not pacing out of boredom. They're reading your posture. They're watching your focus. And if you raise your hand, they may not answer, because in this test, the answer is your responsibility now. It's your turn to remember, your turn to act, your turn to choose. No new instruction, no spiritual high, just the sound of your own breath and the quiet whisper of conviction within you. This is what faith looks like in real time, not loud, not obvious, not emotional, but quiet, solid, unshakable. You've already been taught. The notes were given, the lessons were repeated, and now this moment of silence is heaven's confidence in you. If God didn't think you were capable, he'd still be teaching, still correcting, still redirecting. But he stopped speaking because it's your time to speak with your actions. Do you trust him enough to obey without feedback? Do you remember enough to walk without being carried? Do you believe enough to continue without the feeling? That's the test, and in every real test, the teacher stays silent because the test is not about the teacher's voice. It's about the student's answer. So if it's quiet right now, don't panic, don't freeze, don't assume you're alone. Recognize silence for what it is, a stage, a spotlight, a sacred moment of proving, and heaven is watching, not waiting for perfection but for authenticity. The silence isn't forever, but the test, it's already begun, and now it's your turn. You kept thinking there'd be more time, more signs, more answers, more instruction, but preparation doesn't last forever. Every season has an expiration date. Even the lessons must stop so the learning can begin. You assumed the teaching would never end, that the voice would always echo, that the guidance would always be obvious, that clarity would come again and again, but that was never the agreement. Instruction was for a season, application is for now. You were given warnings, but you ignored them. You were offered wisdom, but you delayed it. You were handed truth, but you filed it away under someday. And now someday is today, and you're surprised it came so soon, but the test didn't arrive early, you just weren't paying attention. You thought preparation was permanent. You thought the classroom would last forever. You thought God would keep repeating himself until you finally decided to listen. But heaven doesn't stutter. He spoke once, he confirmed twice, he waited 3 times, then came the silence, not out of anger but out of order, because every lesson has a deadline. You don't stay in the gym forever. Eventually you step onto the field, and now here you are on the field, under pressure, with no whistle, no coach yelling, no instructions, just the ball in your hands and the world watching, and you whisper, "I'm not ready." But the truth is you were never meant to feel ready. You were meant to remember what you were told. He gave you mornings when the word spoke directly to you. He gave you people who warned you with wisdom. He gave you rest stops, red flags, and revelations. But you called them ordinary. You labeled them routine. You postponed the obedience because you didn't feel the urgency. Now the urgency is here, and the silence feels cruel only because you wasted the sound. You thought preparation was protection, but preparation was responsibility. Every seed planted was meant to be harvested. Every truth taught was meant to be tested. Every whisper heard was meant to be walked out. But you kept waiting for what? A perfect moment, another confirmation, a louder voice, no. Instructions were never meant to be repeated indefinitely, because love doesn't spoon feed, love equips, love trains, love releases. You heard what you needed. You just didn't expect to be held accountable so soon. But heaven doesn't delay for indecision, and the timeline of testing doesn't bend. For your procrastination, the oil in the lamp must be ready before midnight. The armor must be worn before the battle trumpet sounds. The foundation must be built before the flood arrives. You thought there'd be a warning shot, but the warning already came many times, and now it's quiet. Not because the help is gone, but because the help already happened. The silence is not a punishment. It's a shift from what was given to what must now be lived. And it may feel harsh, unfair, sudden, but it's not sudden. It's scheduled. The silence you hear now is the sound of God stepping back, not out of the room, but out of your way, because the instruction is over, and your choices are the only voice left. You had the words, you had the nudges, you had the time, and the fact that it's quiet now. That's not the injustice, that's the justice. You were prepared, you were warned, you were given what you needed, and now the test is proving if you believed any of it. So don't panic in the silence. Don't pretend you weren't equipped. Don't act like the teaching never came, because the silence doesn't lie. It reveals whether you trusted the preparation or merely admired it, and now the mirror is in front of you, and your reflection is the only voice left. You thought faith meant feeling something. You thought faith came with fireworks. You thought when God moved, you'd know it by the noise. But faith isn't proven in the loud. It's revealed in the quiet. Anyone can believe when the music is playing, when the preacher is shouting, when the prayers are flowing and the goosebumps come easy. But what happens when it all stops, when the feelings disappear, when the room is still, when the heavens are shut? That's where real faith begins, because faith isn't a performance, it's not emotion, it's not momentum. Faith is what you choose to do when there's no external evidence telling you to keep going. You said you trusted him, but now there's no sign, no signal, no support. So what now? Can you still obey when the answer is delayed? Can you still believe when the door stays shut? Can you still love him when it feels like he's left the room? Because that's the test. Not how loud your worship is when the breakthrough comes, but how steady your steps are when nothing changes. You waited for confirmation. You asked for another dream. You wanted the sky to open up again. But silence doesn't cancel your assignment. It confirms it. When you can't hear him but still walk in his direction, that's faith. When you feel forgotten but still stay faithful, that's faith. When you feel weak but keep doing what's right, that's faith. And faith like that doesn't need a sign. It is the sign, because faith is not the absence of fear. It's the refusal to bow to it. You said you had faith, but was it faith in God or faith in feelings? Was it trust in his voice or trust in the atmosphere? Was it dependence on his truth or on your emotional state? Because now the feelings are gone, the fire is gone, the spiritual high is gone, and what's left is what's real. This is why the silence matters, because it strips everything away until only the foundation remains, and what survives in silence is what you actually believe. You don't need the volume to prove devotion. You need the discipline, discipline that worships when the heart is heavy, discipline that prays when the room feels empty, discipline that chooses truth when lies feel louder. This is where the real ones rise, not on stages but in shadows, not in applause but in agony. When no one sees it, when no one claps for it, when no one understands it, faith built in silence is stronger than faith sparked by sound, because it doesn't collapse when the noise dies down. Faith without noise is faith without conditions, no spotlight, no miracle in sight, no confirmation text. Just trust, raw, quiet, costly, and this kind of faith, it doesn't beg God to talk again. It walks like he already did. This kind of faith doesn't demand evidence. It becomes evidence. People will look at you and say, "How are you still standing?" And you'll answer, "I stopped needing signs. I started trusting silence, because silence doesn't mean absence, and quiet doesn't mean confusion. It just means the test is now yours to take, and the faith is now yours to live, not based on sound, but on substance. Faith without noise isn't lesser, it's deeper, and now deep is what's being asked of you. If faith without noise is real, then struggle without answers is sacred. You asked to grow. You didn't expect it would look like this. You thought growth would feel like rising, but most growth feels like breaking, stretching, straining, sweating in silence. You prayed for strength. But strength isn't handed out like a gift. It's built in pressure, forged in friction, formed in the struggle. This is why the silence hurts, because it exposes the parts of you that haven't matured yet, the impatience, the fear, the craving for reassurance, the addiction to comfort. And so, silence presses, not to punish you, but to surface the truth, because what doesn't surface can't be healed, and what isn't tested can't be trusted. Struggle shows you what's real. When the voices stop, the real thoughts come out. The buried questions rise. Does God even see me? Am I really called? Was I ever prepared? Why does it feel like I'm alone in this? And it's in those questions that growth begins, not because you found the answers, but because you stayed in the questions without quitting. You didn't run. You didn't numb yourself. You didn't give up and pretend it didn't matter. You stayed, you wrestled, you held on, and that's where roots go. Deep in the dark, in the dirt, in the unseen place where no one claps, because surface growth is easy, but roots only grow under pressure, and God is not building a fragile life in you. He's building a foundation that doesn't crack in storms, but that kind of foundation requires silence, struggle, stillness. You say you can't feel him, but what if the silence isn't the absence of God, it's the presence of growth? What if he stepped back not to leave, but to let you become resilient, become faithful, become whole, and becoming is never painless. Ask the seed when it breaks through the ground. Ask the caterpillar inside the cocoon. Ask the clay under the pressure of the potter's hands. None of them are comfortable, but all of them are transforming. The struggle is sacred because it's the place where old things die and new things are born. Old fears lose power. Old patterns are challenged, old mindsets are exposed, and the new you starts to emerge, not the you who depends on perfect conditions, but the you who survives silence, the you who walks with unanswered questions, the you who keeps trusting without applause. That's who this silence is making. You want easy, but easy never changes anyone. You want quick, but quick never matures anything. So the struggle continues, and you're tempted to resent it, but don't, because everything strong in you is being built in this season. The patience you prayed for, it's not falling from the sky. It's forming in delay. The faith you desired, it's not being sung into existence. It's being forged in silence. The character you wanted, it's not coming through applause. It's coming through wrestling. So if it hurts, let it. If it's heavy, carry it. If it's silent, stay with it. Because the growth is not before the struggle, it's not after it either. The growth is in the struggle, right here, right now, in the pressure you want to escape. This is where he's making you, not louder, but deeper, not flashier, but stronger, not busier, but wiser. The struggle is not the sign of abandonment. It's the process of becoming, and if you don't run from it, you'll rise through it, because everything you're praying to be is waiting on the other side of your willingness to stay in this.